Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored, Never Boring, and another one of these videos where I restore a piece of my 1990s copy of HeroQuest. Today I am going to be looking at the Fireplace, which comprises a cardboard element folded into shape and then a plastic base. So I'm going to be using a lot of methods that I've used in my previous videos in order to get this looking a little bit better than it does right now. As you can see, the fireplace has been painted, so I will need to deal with that. Also, the cardboard is cracking down the sides, and there are nubs that have not been cleaned off. So we are going to give the base a Dettol bath to remove all that existing paint, and we're going to apply some paint to the cardboard element, and then when the Dettol has done its work on the base, we will repaint that after removing those little nubs. So it's all pretty simple stuff that we have seen in other videos in this restoration series, nothing particularly new or challenging here. As you can see here, the bottom of the card element has been chewed up slightly, so it's time to crack out the PVA glue. And what I'm doing here is I'm applying PVA to the chewed up areas. Those are areas where the top layer, the paper layer of the card has started to delaminate. And I'm applying a small amount of PVA, and then I'm very carefully moving the paper back down over those areas that are chewed up to cover it back up. You won't really see that when the card element is back inside the plastic base, but this does reinforce it, and if it does show at all, it will look a little bit neater. So I'm doing all of those little chewed up areas first, carefully pulling that paper down wherever it can be. And then when I've dealt with that, I'm going to apply PVA glue to all of the exposed edges of the card. That's all the way around, including the underside which goes into the plastic base. And this is just going to reinforce those edges so they don't get bashed and chewed up again in future as badly as they have been. But also it seals the card, stops moisture getting in, and generally just makes the whole thing a little bit tougher, a little bit more robust, so it will last a little while longer, hopefully. So I'm just working all the way around, and I'm using a Games Workshop texture tool here for texture paint. Having dealt with that, it's time to apply some paint to the areas where the top paper coat of the cardboard has cracked. So I'm using Balor Brown and Screaming Skull on the left hand side, which is slightly lighter, and I will use Balor Brown and Avalanche Sunset on the right hand side of the fireplace where it's slightly darker. So first we're using the Balor Brown and Screaming Skull. You may have to experiment with the mixture here. I've used about 3 parts Screaming Skull to 1 part Balor Brown for this side. And that's just about right, but occasionally, just for a little bit of variation in it, I might add just a little bit more brown or take a little bit out. On the right hand side, it is mainly Balor Brown with just a small touch of the Avalanche Sunset in there, just to give it a slightly more yellow look, to try and blend it in as much as possible with the art of the stonework there. And I'm applying that all the way up on both sides. And then I'm going to use Abaddon Black, and this is to touch in any cracks on areas of shadow on the artwork, but also to line in the block work again where I have had to paint over the black lines of the block work. And when it's all done, it looks pretty good. You can tell that there's some paint there, but it's not too bad. Finally, what I'm going to do is just use a mix of Balor Brown and Avalanche Sunset to go all the way around the edge of the piece, just to paint that exposed cardboard edge. Now the back of the piece is a little bit more awkward. I'm using a combination of Celestra Grey, Dawnstone, Cabalite Green and Athonian Camo Shade. It's about 70% Celestra Grey, 20% Dawnstone, and then just a dash of Cabalite Green and Athonian Camo Shade, just because the artwork on the back of this fireplace does have a slight green tinge to it, and it's quite difficult to try and recreate it. But it's definitely not just a straight matte grey. A grey will look too obvious when you do it. So I've tried to add just a little hint of green to the grey. And I'm relatively happy with what I managed to achieve here. But I'm applying it all the way down that crack, which is quite a visible crack on the reverse. And again, you may need to tweak the mixtures and keep going back and feathering it and blending it to try and get it to mix in with the surrounding artwork. But while that's all been going on, the Dettol has done its work on the base. The base has come out, the paint is all stripped off, and we have used a mold line remover to remove the nubs, and then we have given it a Chaos Black primer. And now I'm going to paint the wood in the fireplace using Zandri dust. I will use 2 thin coats of this over all of the logs, just to make sure it's got a good coverage. Although there will be a lot of different paints being applied over these wooden logs eventually. Next up, I'm using Agrax Earthshade, and this is just to go over those logs, just to bring out the details, tone the brown colour down, make it look a bit more woody. Again, there's going to be a lot of other paints going over the top of it, but it's worth doing just to define any details. We're now switching to Ulthuan Grey, and this is to do the actual stonework. And it's a little bit odd to go straight from black to the Ulthuan Grey. But because this is a fireplace, I'm trying to make it look like aged stone that is covered in ash and dirt, and then there's also hot coals in there, just building up that sense of heat in it. I'm now switching to Dawnstone, and I'm doing what I call a wet brush, but other people call an overbrush. It's a bit like a dry brush, but with a little bit more paint on the bristles, and it's a darker grey, so I'm actually putting a darker grey over a lighter grey, but I'm mainly focusing on the front section of the stone. And again, it's because we're dealing with a fireplace which is supposed to be generating heat. I want the stone to look lighter towards the actual fireplace and then darker further away from the fireplace. Next, we're going to actually deal with the embers themselves. So I'm going to Ceramite White, and for this you need a brush that you don't care about because you're going to wreck it. I've put a little bit of Ceramite White on there, and I am stabbing it onto the embers. This is really going to damage any brush you use, but I'm just stabbing it randomly around just to try and get a sense of those white hot coals at the base. I'm then switching to Flash Gets Yellow, but really any yellow will do, and I'm doing the same thing again. So we're going to start trying to build up fiery colours in the fireplace. And you can see that occasionally I move out over the stonework a little bit to try and get a sense of that heat and light. Next we're going to Fire Dragon Bright. And again we're doing the same thing. So we're just building up through the whites, through the yellows, through the oranges. And of course then we will get to the reds. And I'm using Mephiston Red, which is probably a bit of a bad idea. The Mephiston Red's a little bit too much of a harsh transition from the orange. So I do a little bit of that, and then I actually change to a different red. I'm actually changing to Wild Rider Red, and I will use that. And I'm going to switch to a slightly softer bristled brush as well, just to try and make it a slightly smoother transition between those colours. But it's weird painting things like embers because you are going in reverse rather than going from dark colours and working up to lighter highlights. You're starting with your lightest colours and working up to darker colours, which is why we are now switching to Abaddon Black. And we're going to give up on the stabbing motion now, and we are going to do a good old-fashioned dry brush. And this is just going to pick out the tops of those logs and things and make them look like they're blackened and charcoaled, and generally just give that sense of the parts that are furthest away from the fire and have burned out. And that's it finished. That's what it looks like. You can see there's transitions through the various colours. You've got the blacks of the charcoal, and then the white of the ash, and then you've got the various different colours, the glow moving out across the stonework. It's not the greatest paint job in the world, but I think it simulates the effect that I was going for. Regardless, it's basically done at this point. We just need to reassemble the whole thing. So the cardboard insert goes back into the base, and there it is, all done. That's ready for the base to be varnished, and it's good to go. It's a finished piece. And I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. And hopefully, you've found this video interesting. If you have liked it, please consider pressing the like button. If you've really liked it, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so. And hopefully, I'll see you all again very soon. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.